So greetings, everybody. If you want to take your seats. Thank you all for coming. George Smith and I are really pleased you're here. I think we have a great panel and some really interesting presentations. I'm Tom Paris. I'm president of iSciences, and George Smith and I co-convened this session. And I'm just going to jump right into it. We're going to basically cover some really exciting new initiatives from NOAA, the Equitable Climate Services Action Plan, and some new climate resilience services and capabilities being supported by the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructural law. Our first speaker is Joe Pica. Joe serves as the Deputy Director of NCEI, or the National Centers for Environmental Information. He's been leading day-to-day operations since 2018. Prior to that position, he served as Director of the Office of Observations for the National Weather Service, and also had a successful career as a NOAA Corps officer, including commanding officer for 2 NOAA ships, the Okeanos Explorer and the Ronald H. Brown. So I think the easiest thing is just use the arrows. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, Tom. Looks like Nick and so they're seeing the my chin on the Zoom. One of my challenges. So maybe hopefully they can hear me. I'll stand a little back. So just keeping in mind all the virtual attendees. So I get to kick off the panel and talk a little bit about NOAA's Equitable Climate Services Action Plan. I want to give a lot of credit to our Assistant Secretary, Janie Radici. She really led this effort. Her right hand, Ella Clark, is part of the reason I have some of these slides and is helping to coordinate these activities. And I'd be certainly remiss if I didn't call out Sharon Misek, who's the Southern Regional Climate Services Director, who works for us and is part of the team that helped to assemble this action plan. So the idea of which is to meet a couple of NOAA's strategic goals, climate ready nation and equity, and basically getting information in the hands of people makes sense. Thank you. All right, so better services. There's a lot of things that we do that we're watching, and climate change, obviously, over the past couple of decades, we've really been able to explain, here's what's happening, and people are watching it, and we're to the 5th National Climate Assessment, so it's there. So the next stage is, well, what do we do with that? How do we communicate new solutions? How do we, for example, with the engineering sector, instead of using 30 years historical data to base our requirements for building codes, what about using the next 30 years, the next 15 years? So the lack of that kind of translation, and it's translation. The science is there, the information is there in a scientific view, but how do we make it so that it's available to all sorts of people to use? And how do we enable action? Hence the need for this in an action plan. So what do? We actually use some of our existing best practices, and some of you're going to hear from some of the people in the room who've done that, where we have roundtables, climate equity roundtables. We have roundtables with the Department of Commerce, with the industry sectors that we're focusing on. And we gather what are the needs, what's working, what's not working. We want to continue to do this. So what we did is we did a request for information. We did that in person with listening sessions. We did it also with written. but we made it very public so people could provide us input based on our ability to do this many times very successfully over the last few years. Here are the areas we wanted to cover. How do we enhance accessibility of the services? What's the capacity and how do we build some of that capacity in communities to absorb and use the data? Or do we have to translate? How do we meet halfway? How do we do some co-production of some of these capabilities? Here's kind of an example of some of the engagements and who we heard from, what the attendees, what sectors we got to attend the listening sessions, as well as where we got the written comments, quite a bit. Here are the themes that we heard from them. Prioritize that access, support decisions at hyper local scales. And imagine that. When I saw that one, I'm like, wait a minute, we're a national center, we have regional, we do a little bit at the state level, hyper local, huge scaling up for these capabilities. So how do we do that? Connections between climate change and socioeconomic. Here's where it makes sense, particularly for risk. Meaningful community engagement and assistance, and support the underserved, tribal, and indigenous. And the last one I thought was very interesting because part of our equity goal for NOAA is to engage and support all sorts of folks, not just to focus internally on diversity, but when we engage externally, they called out our internal diversity that is needed to be there. That basically they want to talk to someone like themselves that understands their values, their needs in order to support them. So they're really, we got a signal that said, hey, we need to focus on that as well. And we so we have an action plan. I'm assuming that the slides are going to be shared and there's a link to that plan. You can easily search that online so you can see it. This is actions we're taking, both short and long term to do this. And it's going to be a continuous loop. We're going to continue to seek feedback on how we do this. Here are the 5 priorities that we're advancing, and all the actions are aligned under each of these goals that really address some of the things that we've heard. So you can take a look at those. They go towards each of those themes that was raised, and we're going to try and I'm going to just take an initial high-level overview of some of the ways we're going to try and meet those as we go forward. That feedback loop is going to be really important. It's not just that we've engaged, we've done the RFIs, we're going to continue to engage. That will likely be a theme that we hear from my colleagues as we talk about what we're doing here. And another component was like we do with the Science Advisory Board, there's an effort to establish a federal advisory committee that would help us in these areas. So how are we going to do it? One of the ways we're going to do it is using the Inflation Reduction Act industry proving ground, which NCI is leading across NOAA, in order to, we're going to build on that effort. So I'm going to give a little overview and talk about a couple of ways that that's enhancing or going to bring resources to this action plan. So as Deke mentioned in the opening plenary, if you're there, the idea is to radically improve the uptake of our climate data and information for 3 demonstration sectors: architecture, engineering, insurance, reinsurance, and retail. So we're working that, and the overall program is kind of a whole effort across NOAA. If the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research is better at doing this or providing that projection, that's who we're going to go to provide the information. We're also trying some things like other transactional authorities. We're working with NSF on some university, academia, and research centers on catastrophe models. There's a whole host of things that are happening underneath this effort. And this is kind of how it's broken out with program management, continuous engagement, data and infrastructure is part of it. We've got to put some things in together. And then industry support. And it's really built off some of the work that's already done. You'll hear more about a couple of those sectors in a minute. The work streams, based on what we've heard, we've actually organized some of the work streams in 3 areas: website development, think portal, what is useful for that particular sector, what we've heard. The next part is translation. How do we make it usable? I'll use the engineering sector again, and that's, they have a hazards tool. How can we make the data that we're feeding right into that hazard tool so all the engineers that use that have access to it can still use it today? So it's taken our science, our authoritative science information, which they trust, and then putting it in their tool to use. And then last, development. What are the things we have to do to develop it for the future? Today, most things are done on retrospective data, particularly for building codes and other such analysis with a mean value and exceeds probabilities. We've got to co-develop that looking forward 30, 50, 70 years, depending on what the need is, what the sector is. A couple of ways that we're building off that effort with those sectors to help meet the climate equitable plan is to basically work with folks we already work with. Our American Association of State Climatologists, we're working with them. We're actually seed funding some pilot projects to actually say, hey, we made this for this sector. Could you use it? So it's not just about those sectors and feeding that model, but it's also saying, how can it be used more equitably across all communities and so that they understand it. So we want to show that benefit from national to regional to local services, and they're one way for us to do that, at least in the States. The other place that we're doing this is we're working with our cooperative institute and with the City College of New York, where we also have a cooperative science center. So it's a minority serving institution where we're trying to fund through our Office of Education many fellowships so that we can actually have folks that are going to come into the organization. We're also trying to figure out how to work with them so that they work with us on how to make this information even more usable, a much broader community, for policymakers, students, underserved businesses, perhaps outside those sectors. And we just in general want to lower the barrier to get into our information. With that, I will cede the floor to my colleague.
So you can take questions and clarification now, but I'd like to contribute as much time as possible for open discussion at the end. So are there questions and clarification?
We're all aiming for 15 minutes, so we at least have 30 minutes of questions at the end. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Adam Smith. Adam is an applied climatologist at NOAA. And he's the lead scientist for the $1 billion weather and climate disasters, which we saw Deke refer to earlier. And he performs research to standardize and integrate many public and private sector disaster data sources into a better quality controlled disaster cost framework and related data sets and research tools. And he's the co-lead at NCI for engaging with the property insurance and reinsurance sector. We are.
Thank you, Tom. So yes, today I'm going to give the next 12 to 15 minutes some perspective about big picture as far as last 15 years, last 4 or 5 years, bring it to the present, and then talk about the future a bit. So we're actively engaging with the insurance, reinsurance, and finance community as well, and understanding their issues, their products, their problems, and how we could help better find solutions and data and information for their tools. So last year, almost anywhere you lived in the country, you saw some extreme weather and climate hazards. From coast to coast, there were 28 separate $1 billion weather and climate events. This was a record. And you can see from the floods from the West Coast in California to the East Coast, from New England down to Florida, the tragic firestorm in Hawaii in August, but also the severe convective storm events, which we have seasonally every year about. But what strikes people about this map is actually the most costly event, including the 2 tropical cyclones, was the drought heat wave. That was focused Texas, the Mississippi River, Louisiana. That was about a $15 billion event, which is a conservative estimate. Largely focused on just the agricultural sector, based on the public and private sector data that exists for that hazard. But you can see this is a growing risk, as Deke alluded to, and certainly we are all in the arena to mitigate, to adapt to these extremes, which we know will continue as we move into the future. The last kind of framing slide would be this. This is, of course, the increase in the cost for these billion-dollar disasters and frequency. And yes, a lot of this is from the growth and exposure in hazardous areas, the wildland to urban interface. People like to live near lakes and rivers or the coast. And those are hazardous areas, but also, as we know, climate change is supercharging some of these extremes that can enhance billion-dollar disaster impacts. And again, you see last year, kind of off the charts. What was lucky about last year is that we didn't have a major hurricane hit a major metropolitan area, which we've had in many recent years. And so that's why the costs were closer to the $100 billion range and not multiple hundreds of billions of dollars, which really rattles the insurance, the property insurance and reinsurance industry, domestically and globally. So NCI is really a great place. We have hundreds of products across all these different sectors, so many different constituents and stakeholders, to annual to decadal, from local to national to global. And you can see just some of these different products are highlighted in this chart, from the billion-dollar disasters that it talks about insurance to even the Snowfall Impact Index, which is a disaster response product that helps FEMA, or the energy sector with heating and cooling degree days. Of course, agriculture and crop insurance and drought is very important, but even space weather. So we have, many different products from, as we say, the surface to the sun to the bottom of the ocean. But let's focus on what I'm here to talk about, which is the insurance and reinsurance sector and the focus. So this is property insurance. It's not life or health insurance. This is your home, your business, vehicles, other assets that can be impacted by different hazard types. And so there's insurance, but there's also reinsurance, which is insurance for insurance companies. And here's a quick kind of model of what the marketplace looks like. At the bottom of the triangle, you see property owners that have policies, pay premiums. Then the next level, it may be State Farm, Allstate, you pick your insurance company, property insurance. Then reinsurers, and then capital markets. Even the Treasury is really looking at a lot of this data and kind of the risk that's growing in different regions for different hazards, for different asset classes. And they're saying some of this is becoming unstable. And so more data, more information, better products and services across the full vertical of that is what can help us bring it into stability. And so some of the major players, of course, insurance companies, reinsurance companies, but even state offices have their own insurance commissioners who kind of are a buffer between the price increases with premiums and then what the actual risk is on the ground. But of course, there's many different associations. Deke was in DC last week, signed an MOU between the Reinsurance Association of America and NOAA. This is kind of a big deal. And so RAA has been a longtime partner. We also work with actuaries with AAA or NAIC, and III is the Insurance Information Institute, which they have a lot of information. But of course, academia, even outside of government and outside the private sector, does a lot of really interesting and important work. So our approach, I think we're all kind of taking sector by sector, is what we've done in the past, but maybe we're making it a bit more rigorous and more iterations in the cycle now. So first we identify what we're trying to do. What are the hazards? What are the areas of focus for the sector that they need, not what we think they need. And then of course the who's in the space, what do they do? Who do they work with? But then the how, becoming a trusted, responsive partner. And I think NOAA as a whole, including certainly NCEI, has, it has a deep well of trust is built over decades for many different partners and different industries. And we continue to innovate and make great products and services, but the demand is so large, it's sometimes challenging to figure out the order of the innovation. And then finally, I think the last piece would be the when and the where. And right now with the insurance reinsurance sector, we're discussing with them. There's a small team right now, which will get a little bit bigger, that represents what we view as kind of the core of the industry. And we're having meetings with them every 6 weeks, talking about the products and services we're trying to enhance, making sure we understand what they told us in the past. I'll show you some of our past engagements, and then where they see their needs in the future. So here you see on the left, Carl Hetty. He was the VP of Munich Reinsurance. That's one of the largest reinsurance companies in the world. And this was back from 2018. This is the Reinsurance Association of America, which is their their main meeting, kind of like the AMS meeting is for the weather enterprise. And you see he's got one of our $1 billion maps up there, and I think that's like the map he spoke to for about 10 minutes, just giving context about how their industry, views risks and tries to make better decisions. But we've also engaged with him. This is an info chart on the right, talking about, different metrics of the industry, kind of the health of the industry, and where their challenges are and what products they use, but also other products that we could help them to innovate from a government point of view. So some quick background, as I mentioned, Reinsurance Association of America is kind of like the belly button. That's where no matter what layer of the insurance industry you're in, you're a catastrophe modeler, you're a primary insurance company, you're a reinsurance company, you're even with the NAIC, they work with the RAA a lot. And the former president, Frank Nutter, we've had a lot of great discussions with him. He's been a great ally. Now there's a new president. We're building relationships with the new president. And, we can't go into these hyperlinks, but these are different reports and different meeting feedback documents that we've really generated over the last decade plus. Even the $1 billion disasters, that was enhanced fundamentally as a product back in 2008 when I developed some IP agreements with several key industry players. And the trajectory of that product would not be the same if we had not engaged with the industry back then. A few other examples. So for the past 4 years, one of our directors, Ellen McRae, has done a lot of great work with the industry, hosting roundtables, developing work plans with the Department of Commerce. And she actually helped to establish the kind of some of the IRA background, working with Deke and Mike Brewer and Joe to establish what we have today, which is a once in a generation opportunity. And so now it's time to act. We're kind of hitting the road and doing what we've learned in the past from our different partners with what they say they need in the future. Here are some more examples. The American Academy of Actuaries did a keynote speech there and understand their products. Federal Housing and Finance Agency, that's an important constituent. But, Gallagher Re, Munich Re, Liberty, Aon, these are all big partners and players. Even USAA, we worked with the board of directors recently to integrate veterans data as a socioeconomic vulnerability within the $1 billion framework down at the county and census tract scale, because that's something that FEMA or CDC had not done, but that's an important homogeneous population in terms of risk. So understand that the need from the president of USAA, we in about 3 months implemented that data to enhance a product. So a few other examples really quick over the last couple of years. We've had several different webinars about hazard specific areas to drought and wildfire in mid 22, severe convective storms, which is tornado, hail, and high wind events. That was in the beginning of 2023. And there's a whole separate work about catastrophe modeling with an academic kind of focus that's happening kind of as a sidecar to this that I'm talking about today. And finally, just again, last week I mentioned Hadiq was up with the president of the RAA and Dr. Spenrad, who's the leader of NOAA, the administrator of NOAA, and they signed an MOU for kind of underscoring all of this future work that we're planning to do. So to wrap things up, some actual brass tacks about all this. These are just some examples of, in the next 12 to 18 months, products that either are new or more enhanced. And I'll be involved directly in a few of these. So for example, $1 billion disasters going back to 1980 for the last 45 years. We're going to go down in order of magnitude down to $100 million for all the hazards, probably down to the county scale. So we'll have over 1,000 different events in our record base. And that could help as a metadata for things like catastrophe models or other hazard risk analyses. But one thing that surprises people is the impact of hail. Hail is actually a majority of the losses from severe convective storms. It's not tornado, it's not straight line wind from thunderstorms, it's hail, because of just the concentration of assets that can be impacted. So NSSL and partners are developing a more robust hail climatology, which will be, I think, a big win and very important for the industry to mitigate future losses. A few other items: wind-driven rain, a climatology with that. And that also complements other sectors like engineering, because how do you engineer a building to become more robust? Well, you have to have great hazard data to design your to improve the design. Finally, hurricanes are actually, as a hazard, the most costly hazard, as you think there's the concentration of assets along the coasts. And so improvements within HRSAT updates, that's coming soon. And then finally, just showing the big picture, past, present, to future risk at the hazard level at different geographic scales. That's important because the future is going to be a lot different than the past, as we know. And so modifying how we make products and present information for the public or for private sector industry and other decision makers is as important today than it's ever been. And so to wrap things up, we have a pretty mature, long-time relationship with this sector. It's a large industry with many different players that do a lot of different roles. So to seamlessly work with them and make this team that we're trying to iterate with on a 6-week basis we've got to do that part right to make this really work well and make some true advancements with them. And so that's really what we're doing now. We finally have more people, money, and time with this once in a generation investment, and we're just trying to capitalize on that and make things better for everyone. Thank you.
Any questions? So our next speaker, and so what you've seen the big overview from Joe, you've seen one sector from Adam. So we're going to show another sector, which is the retail sector. And Jenny Deason will speak to that. So Jenny is the engagement and partnerships lead at the North Carolina Institute for Climate Studies, or NCICS, as we lovingly refer to it. She works with the NOAA Cooperative Institute. She also works with the NOAA Cooperative Institute for Satellite and Earth System Studies, with partnership activities with NOAA, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, and other industry tech leaders. As well as sort of the user side of the equation, working with the Retail Industry Leaders Association, or RELA, Reinsurance Association of America, which we just heard about, and the Electric Power Research Institute. More generally, she provides strategic user engagement support to the NCEI, and has served previously as a program lead for the Department of State NOAA U.S.-India Partnership for Climate Resilience. So please welcome Jenny.
Blurry? That was a little bit, isn't it? Did it a second ago. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny Deason. I'm happy to see familiar faces here. I have quite a bit to share, and so we'll get right into it. I think it's important to recognize the unique set of logos and images that you see here, because I think when we think about NOAA data and information for industry, it takes a lot of partnerships to make something like this happen and for it to stick. So I work for the university. The university is a cooperative institute for NOAA, a very well strategically planned concept. And in my role, I'm not a Fed, I'm a state employee with an academic background that allows me to be a little bit more creative. But in order to get things done, sometimes we have to be like water. So I think my motivation here is to share our story with retail and how a little bit of curiosity allowed us to be like water, that's allowed us to be technical today. So I'd like to recognize my two colleagues that are not here today, Maggie Coates and Allison Bashford. They're both part of the contracting support team, pretty instrumental in putting this together. And overall, just recognize that there is a big effort behind IPG that comes from a lot of our colleagues and contractors. So many of you are in the room. I just want to recognize that. So in my role as engagement lead, I do a couple of things. We call it engagement, but I often say I'm in the business of selling climate data and information for free to everyone all the time. And that's just so that I can say how complicated my job is, but it's a lot of fun because we're talking about applying data and information in business and industry, which is where I spent the first third of my career. Education and outreach is unavoidable. It's inevitable, whether we're speaking with business and industry leaders, or decision makers, or students. We are informing our decision makers on how to utilize this information. And through that, we're doing a lot of workforce development, all the way from undergraduate, graduate, to professionals, to decision makers, to CEOs and leaders and association leaders. So I'm pretty humbled to be in this role. We spent a lot of time talking about the IPG effort, industry proving ground, started from years and years and years of experience and expertise. NOAA has been doing industry engagement. NCEI has been doing industry engagement. This effort is unique in the sense that we're talking about application for climate resilience and adaptation. It's a little bit facile to have this discussion in the recent years, just because of what Adam shared with the amount of disasters we're experiencing, the amount of extreme events we're experiencing. And there isn't a location, at least in the United States and in North America, that would not talk about how they have experienced it. However, when we think about resolution, solutions, adaptation, and mitigation, there's a big journey. So this particular effort, as we have heard the background about, is an investment made by Commerce to NOAA, to NCEI, and our partners. And our colleagues here have shared that it's 3 primary industry sectors to get started with. The motivation here is, how can NOAA's information help industry with decision making? This is data to decision pathway. It's a big journey and a lot goes on in between. And I know many of you know this, but it's with the motivation of resilience and rebuilding communities. So I'm on the retail side, big box around retail. And we can talk more about how that originated. So what is retail and why RILA? RILA is the association, Retail Industry Leaders Association. They're unique in the sense that they have a mission, and I want to read that for you. Retail is a U.S. trade association focused on retailers. That's a lot. A lot of folks are part of retail, including supply chain, transportation, shipping, navigation. And as a trade association, they are focused on things like sales, innovation, volume, revenue. However, they convene decision makers in the industry. And what caught my attention is that their goal is bold and simple. It's to elevate a dynamic industry by transforming the environment in which retails operate. So it didn't take us a lot to connect with this association as a start, not the end, because there are many partners in the retail industry. This is one of them. And so we connected with their Senior VP of Corporate Social Responsibility. Her name is Erin Hyatt. She's also pretty instrumental to this conversation. So we started the discussion and it came from a number of places. Trends that we were seeing at NOAA data and NCEI for who's coming to NCEI. This industry came up to the top. We also don't necessarily have a department focused on this industry. We also started to understand the impact that retail has in the last mile, primarily during the COVID time period. So when we think about climate impacts as a threat multiplier, and you think about the individual, the general public that's affected, now you can start to see it hitting it into people's homes. So how do we make the industry more robust, more resilient, more adaptive? How can we inspire design, development, and creation of new products and services that the industry can offer? So we, as the end individual decision maker, the mother, the parent, the caretaker, can make good, sound decisions that protect and preserve and conserve and support our environment. So products and services. So how can NOAA data then fit into this journey? Okay. So when we think about retail, they are talking about 3 primary things where weather, climate, and extreme events affect their entire industry: supply chain, their particular focus on sustainability and asset protection. They are equally affected by extreme weather. This is the protection of their assets. Their supply chains are disrupted. They can't deliver the product in time, which we care about because the price of that product goes up. We want that price of the product to go down. So we need on-time delivery, not to mention a robust and resilient rail system, aircraft, such, all of which gets affected by weather and climate. So it didn't take us a lot, in fact, to connect with this association and the executives that make up the members for retail. So we are now speaking on a regular basis with corporate social responsibility leaders, oftentimes CEOs, oftentimes presidents of these organizations and companies. Okay, but going back to the day job, what do I do on the back end? Well, Joe talked about 3 primary focus areas for IPG in terms of us making progress and breakthroughs. And we put them into 3 boxes for now, but the reality is that they are not in boxes. The data, information, products, services, reports that we produce will be in a number of different dimensions and will be cross-disciplinary. But it kind of makes it easy for us to think about it in these 3 boxes. There's a whole lot of engagement involved to create a new data product, to produce a new sort of assessment or an analysis on a data product. And if we're talking about a new observing variable, that's a whole new discussion. So our motivation in the first phase was we had a whole lot of discussions with different partners. And from prior engagement, we learned a lot. This is the kind of stuff we learned that they wanted. This is before us even starting the discussions post IPG launch. Okay, so the launch occurred in January. We all of us kind of went off into our different directions. And with retail, we've had a series of discussions, working sessions. This is what we thought they wanted. Then we had a whole lot of working sessions. In the month of May and June, we've had regular routine roll up the sleeves working sessions. And I want to acknowledge that, you know, the contracting staff and the support that's been helping behind this has been pretty instrumental in bringing it together. It's non-trivial to go from the amount and the wealth of information we have to the magnitude and the complexity of the industry, and then shaping it into the 3 boxes of the work we're supposed to do. So I want to share that a lot has gone on into the conversations, and that industry partners have come to the table prepared. They don't always know what they want when it comes to NOAA data, but they know how weather, climate, and extreme events affects their business. The translation of what their need is into the product that we have to produce is our work. So we did a lot of listening, and a lot of sticky note capturing, and a lot of back and forth, a lot of elucidation, a lot of literacy, a lot of description. The first thing is, I don't know all of the data and information that is available from NOAA. I need my crash course. Of course, we hear that in many different spaces, in many different engagement conversations. In fact, it's rather pervasive, and we might think, why isn't there a university coursework on this? So that went on a sticky note over here. I want to share with you some of the things we heard. I want you to read it for a second, and then I want to share with you what my colleagues and I deemed as what we thought are our top 6. Our top 6 doesn't mean that the work will stop there. It just means that that's what we will focus on in the short term. Okay. So what do we hear? Retailers want climate information up and down the entire supply chain. We're going to be busy. Historical weather data specifically they want historical weather data specifically in the GIS usable formats. Okay, so this is an industry that is still basing future investment and planning decisions on what happened last year, what happened 2 years ago. Okay, so what we envision happening is through this engagement and conversation, discuss the role of past information indicators and predictors for what we as a science team think about its role in the future. Okay, so they're basing their decisions for the future based on the past. We're evolving the discussion, but you know, the goal here is to listen and meet their needs, meet them where they are today. Storm surge, they wanted storm surge mapping on a company and site level specific spatial and temporal resolution to view their vulnerabilities. Okay, so this is their asset protection. They want to ensure that their warehouses, their distribution centers, their retail shops are assessed for vulnerability, but they're also able to be protected from storms. Not surprising, we all want our houses protected. But it's a lot of assets, and the asset is at a point location. A lot of our data and information is at a grid scale. So academics use a lot of statistics to go from grid to point. The question is, can we get better? That is okay. They want pre-built GIS layers that retailers can use easily and quickly. When it comes to hurricanes, retailers want to go to our website, click on hurricanes, get everything that they need, because oftentimes there are meetings where they're having to make decisions within 15 to 20 minutes or 30 minutes. They don't have time to call their contractor or even their climatologist or even their data team to understand and assess. They need to make decisions to move transportation routing, umbrellas, this, that, support other locations that are already experiencing events. They need agile, fast decisions. They want to go to our NOAA.gov/industry website under hurricanes, look and see what's happening in their territory quickly. I thought that was rather telling, which goes back to trust. They're basing their decisions off of NOAA information that affect a lot of lives, millions and millions of lives. And they want web pages with use cases. So for those of you that know me and have worked with me for a long time, use cases are storytelling ways to help describe what happened and how do we learn from that. We need those stories. Okay, so at the moment, some of those stories reside in media publications that we have to then sift through and find and then make the judgment call. But when we think about the value of our data for socioeconomic calculations, we need those case studies. How did this improve? How did this decision get improved because we had better access to data coming from them? Okay, so I want to talk more about this for those of you that want to roll up the sleeves, but we have a couple more things to talk about. So please come see me about the sticky notes. One of the things that Tom Paris had challenged me was to think about, so you heard all this, we did all this engagement. What's the widget in the engineering process that's going to make all this happen? And it's a big conversation. So we are in the month of July. We kicked off with retail in May. And our other two colleagues are also going through the same process. So the methodology is twofold. I want to leave today with two key messages. One, we have a service delivery framework across NOAA. We're not reinventing the wheel, but the wheel has to get further detailed, developed, slightly crystallized, slightly modified for the industry. Engineering and architecture and reinsurance and insurance is very, very different than retail. However, they all have linkages and dependency on each other. So there's a framework. This is the NOAA customer delivery framework. And then we have our framework. These are the widgets and the methods and the process that we as a team working with our contracting staff and support are going to try to utilize. There's another engineering diagram that goes behind this that's in a document. Hopefully I will share that at the next ESUP meeting. Bottom line is that it's iterative, a lot of engagement, build a little, test a little, build a little, test a little. So the goal here is to get the security and the validation from industry as we build a little, test a little. And then the other big thing that Tom had challenged me to discuss is, so how do we think we're going to make the industry better? How is this going to make our nation more resilient? These are my personal thoughts and perspectives. We have just put our foot in the water in this journey. 2 years from now, I will have more concrete feedback. So we think we're going to give better data information that provides better forecasts, that allows retailers to plan for their inventory, optimize their supply chains. We know this because they kind of said it, and then they asked for data to match it. We think when we provide granularity and specificity, that allows them to understand the impact of microclimates at their asset, right? The specificity that we talked about earlier. We think just the real-time access is going to give them the ability to make facile decisions. Hopefully, that means improved decision-making and less impacts and less destruction. Right stuff at the right time is sort of the motivation here. We think that we're going to help them understand customer demand better because, you know, certain behavior patterns occur during certain extreme events. We're not always carrying umbrellas all the time, but if you're in Asheville and you've been here the past 2 weeks, you can't go out your door without one. So consumer behavior, their choices for what they purchase will help inform competitive edge and advantage and also new product delivery capabilities. You know, how do we help them kind of do better in their business? In my personal comment, doing well and doing good don't have to be mutually exclusive. And then that ties into building adaptable business models. That's important to us because we want the communities to rebuild pretty quickly after an event, extreme event. So these are some ways we think we're going to be helping the industry that helps society. So let's see, because we're on the hook as part of IPG, we're also going to be measured in how we deliver the solutions. We're having ongoing engagements. We will be at all of these upcoming conferences. We are now being invited by our retail industry partners to be at the supply chain conference where industry CEOs will be there. That gives us the ability to talk a little more with executives and business leaders on how they're looking at climate information, why they should be. I really want to emphasize the work that our team has been doing. Retail wanted hurricane information, so we got very excited. And what started out as a small hurricane special webinar for retail turned into a very nice, beautiful effort by NOAA and its hurricane experts to spend 2 hours with our industry partners, not just with retail, but architecture and engineering. So this is a very specific opportunity where we will improve the hurricane information product delivery and kind of timely too. So I'm very excited about this. Thank you again to the staff and the team behind it to help pull it together. And that's it. I want to also acknowledge Mike Brewer, who's not here today. He's been pretty instrumental and kind of core behind IPG efforts. So it takes a team, and Aaron Hyatt, who is with the retail industry. Thank you.
Any questions of clarification for Jenny? Okay, so we will move on. And I realized I did not preload one of the presentations, so hopefully I can find it. Okay. So our next speaker is Steve Ansari. And we're transitioning from now talking about sectors to talking about the systems engineering that is going to get us from the transition from delivering data to delivering answers. Steve is currently leading the web GIS and data services architecture for the IPG effort that you've been hearing about today, but he's also serves as the lead for the US Drought Portal or drought.gov, which is an amazingly rich resource for drought information for the United States and globally. I encourage you to visit it if you're not familiar with it. He has a background in a variety of GIS, data management and visualization activities within NOAA, with a variety of data sets, including radar, satellites, and severe weather. And he's primary author of the NOAA Weather and Climate Toolkit software application. So please welcome Steve.
Thank you, Tom. So much. All right. Let's see. There we go. All right. So in this talk, I'm gonna raise the hood of the car a little bit and look under the hood and see how we're gonna accomplish some of these things in IPG. And being ESIP, I want to touch on some of the technical aspects that are talking about what we are going to do that is hopefully novel and rapid and allows us to meet the aggressive timelines and the aggressive get things done quickly without building a huge pile of technical debt that we are going to be burdened with for years. Considering all of these aspects is going to guide how we define the architecture of what we're building here. So this is right off of NOAA.gov. It's the second top story to the Twisters story, which is really cool, actually. I had to go down a rabbit hole and look at all that stuff when I was putting these slides together. But assessing the global climate, right? 13 consecutive months of record warm global temperatures and the second lowest June Antarctic sea ice extent. Where does that come from? It comes from files. Somewhere back underneath there, deep, there's files that somebody has worked with and done the analysis and done the climate monitoring to come out with that metric. And that gets to the heart of the matter. From the archives and the files that we have, after you find them, what do you do with them? How do you create insights and answers from the information there? And really, where's the so what? The so what? I have temperature data. So what? Why does it matter? And that's the heart of climate monitoring and the heart of NCEI, really, for the past decades of putting our current information, our recent information to historical perspective. And we couldn't do that without the files and the archive. And what can we do now to build on that? That's what we're hoping we can do in IPG. So customer experience and user experience research that NOAA is doing has told us that many users want more than files. They want answers. Ending with the files is really important, but that's where the story often starts. And so context matters again, the so what. This is a unique opportunity in the IPG, and Adam and Jenny gave a great examples of what different things that the industries are looking for, where we can help move that bar forward farther and giving those insights from our information to build that so what to the data and the files that we are producing, the information we're collecting from the observing systems, and what we're archiving at NCEI. There are many examples where NOAA has taken great strides forward with tools in this direction. There's a whole list of things here many of us are familiar with. The NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer, the NCEI map viewers, the new camera tool, the NCEA Interactive Atlas, which was talked about at the plenary today. That's a fantastic effort and a great step forward in how to browse and look at the different products there. So we're not starting this in a vacuum. We are building on the successes and the everything we've learned so far. We want to continue that momentum. But there's also an opportunity to do a little bit more with that, to be a little bit different in how we approach some of that problem. So here in general, I'm going to start going into technical architectural diagrams and whatnot. But in general, when we take files and we want to do cloud-based analysis, the way that we get to the point where we can start doing insights is by representing a data set as a collection, right? As an entire thing. We're going to look at temperature data, and then we want to dive into that temperature data to pull those insights out. And so there's an aspect of that, this curation and optimization of the data between where we have it in the archive and how we put it into cloud systems to do this. We've been doing this for years. We've done this with databases. right? Similar model we've done for years in businesses done with databases. They load the financial data into the databases. This is how relational databases were sold to us in the 90s. Why we use them at NCEI today. We load data into those and then we build reports and we do an analysis and analytics on those. But our data sets and our data models have changed slightly. We're not just looking at station data. Now we have terabytes, petabytes of reanalysis data, of model data, of interpolated temperature and precipitation data, of remote sensing data, satellite data, that we cannot shove in a business analytics tool like a relational database anymore. So we have to rethink the problem. How can we do that? But the general gist of that is in essence the same. We're pulling that data into a collection and then doing analytics on the collection. And so we're doing that in multiple approaches. And first off, I think multiple approaches are great, right? Because there are different pros and cons to how we do stuff. So there's been a lot of effort to get stuff into the czar format and represent data in the czar collections. A lot of work on the Amazon environment doing stuff with czar. ArcGIS Online is another great environment that lets us pull data into a sort of data lake of geospatial data that exists. When you put something to ArcGIS Online, right, it's existing in that geospatial cloud with data from USGS, from NASA, from the city of Asheville, from all kinds of different partners that then you can pull together to give insights. One of the new things I'm going to talk about here is inroads we're making with the tool called Google Earth Engine. And Google Earth Engine has been growing in use out of various different partners and groups and education to industry, and really grew out of a lot of land cover analysis, but now we are applying it to do stuff with climate and weather as well. So at the core of this is cloud-ready formats. And I talked about czar. That's an example of a cloud-ready format that can be represented as a collection. There's another one that we're working with. And this ties into one of the things that Jenny and Adam mentioned in having interoperability with GIS systems. And so the Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF is a format that we are working with a lot in this platform. This allows us to use this Earth Engine tool to read the data directly off of cloud storage. And to make this all work, we're building on partnerships and tools that already exist and looking for routes of interoperability between them. So what does that mean? That means all the way back to things like CF conventions. Why is it important to even look at CF conventions and standard name tables in this space? It's important in carrying forward what we've learned on the NetCDF data model and how we can apply that in the cloud as well for the interoperability purposes. This example and what we're doing is we're partnering with a very important program, which there's going to be a session on tomorrow, called the NOAA Open Data and Dissemination Program, which has done something really amazing. They have partnered with the cloud service providers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, to recognize that they have a business model for hosting our data for free and giving it out to the public for free with free egress. And we're able to build on that success story to host data in this platform to drive IPG forward. And that allows us to be interoperable to not only this Google Earth Engine platform, but also to the NOAA Geo platform or ArcGIS Online. So what is Earth Engine really good at? It's good at dealing with large gridded data sets. ArcGIS Online. Yes, they do raster stuff, and they're doing more and more in raster and gridded data, but their bread and butter historically has been all the vector data sets, the point line polygon data, linking to other polygon data so you can do reports and things like that. So now we have two cloud-based analysis platforms that are optimized for different data models that represent what we're doing. And that's how we're going to move fast with IPG, by using these platforms that let us build things rapidly. I want to introduce another bit of technology on this is APIs. This is something that is, we've heard from the sectors is important. They want to utilize our APIs to do data access, but also to put things in context, historical context, be able to do some of that analysis. And so we are using the Esri REST API, of course, that comes with ArcGIS Online, but there's another tool that has been developed at the Western Regional Climate Center over the last 10 years called Climate Engine. And that is a set of templates that sit on top of Earth Engine to let you do climate analysis. And that's going to be one of the core tools that we're using for the advanced gridded data dissemination and analysis parts of what we're doing in IPG. What you get when you do this, this analysis is you get access to everybody else's data in that data lake as well. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So what is Climate Engine? Again, Climate Engine is built on Google Earth's platform. It allows thousands of parallel chunks of data to be processed simultaneously. And the processing can work from our cloud optimized geotip files, our GIS files we're already making to meet the needs of industry for just the file access in cloud ready formats. Now we can put an analysis tool right on top of that to start deriving insights and answers. Some of the differences between Earth Engine. If folks have experience with Earth Engine, you know it's a little different than some of the other platforms out there. It's a code first platform. You write scripts. It's for people that write code. And that gives it tons of capabilities and flexibility. You have basically like the power of MATLAB or R at your fingertips with data sets that you don't have to curate. You don't have to manage. They're already there in the cloud, ready to be paired with your analysis. Climate Engine takes that coding aspect away and puts basically code templates on top that let you do common climate operations in a repeatable, reproducible way. Like I wanted to look at how the last 2 weeks of temperature has compared to the 30 years before it. And that's what allows us to do the so what aspect of it. So we're looking at data, right? We'll have the last 30 days of precipitation. How is that compared to the same time period of the 30 years prior? Now, we already do that. Climate Engine lets us do this at newfound scale because now any of the data sets that are in Earth Engine, right here, I'm going to zoom to this slide, with this data lake of data, everybody's putting data there. ECMWF has the ERA 5 reanalysis there. NASA has the GPM iMerge satellite precipitation data there. We're putting 4 or 5 data sets from NOAA there for temperature and precipitation. Now we can do that analysis across all of these data sets as easy as just changing the selection of which data set we use. It allows us to standardize the code, reduce the amount of code we write, and scale this out to scale of not having to deal with that data management. I'm not downloading tar files and untarring files. I'm working with data that's already in the cloud. And that's the bit that's going to allow us to do this in 2 years to get these insights out there. I want to show some examples here. What do I mean by this? Okay, so again, the idea is archives to answers, being able to do the insights and the analysis in real time on the cloud. So let's say a map where the minimum temperature is below freezing over the last 30 days, right? So doing the kind of threshold analysis, counting the number of days it's above 100 degrees, anything like that, right? Now we can do that easily, not just on one data set, but we can do it globally. We can do it on multiple data sets. We can compare like you would an ensemble of models, right? All the data sets we work with have different nuances for how the data is interpolated between the stations. All right, and we just sort of take it as on faith. But there are differences that we now have an opportunity to communicate and quantify. And that allows us to have more confidence, be able to communicate our confidence and the uncertainty better in the data pixel by pixel. Because we all know, if you ask anybody on this board here, or the panel, if we look at this pixel right here, and we look at a pixel out in the Four Corners area of rainfall estimates, which one do we have more confidence in that, right? We would say here, because we have high quality stations nearby, near Bent Creek, down by the Arboretum. We know where the high quality stations are. It gets a lot harder when you get farther away from stations, right? So this is just one example of how we can use some of these cloud-based tools to talk about that in a new way and communicate with the end goal of communicating our confidence and our uncertainty, which is a big part of giving people confidence in our data, right? Because it's different pixel by pixel sometimes. Okay, so here's another example. What if I wanted to know what was the most severe drought that was experienced over the last 10 years? So we can get this result now in mere seconds, right? By looking at the maximum value of the drought monitor over the last 10 years. Here's an example of the Washington state population and heat over the last first part of June, the last 6 weeks, basically. And looking at now, not just what the values were, but why does it matter? Who's affected by this? And this is the other thing about Earth Engine. It's not just temperature and precipitation data that's in there. The same reason that ArcGIS Online is powerful because of what they call the Living Atlas data set, where they pulled all the socioeconomic data, the vulnerability data, the ecosystem data. They pulled all that stuff in there. We have access to the same kinds of information at high resolution grids that we can fuse with our reanalysis grids, our data grids, things like that. So it gives us a new way to do this. So here we're looking at population over 100 degrees, and you can see the heat wave comes through, and 2 million people are now over 100 degrees in their heat. Same thing with corn. We have estimates of what the crop type is. I think it's 50-meter resolution, maybe 30 meter, 30 meter. It's very high resolution. And it's hard to work with. If I'm going to download 30-meter resolution data for the entire country, I think the image is like 100,000 pixels by 70,000, some crazy thing I'd never download as a GeoTIFF and just work with on my computer. Well, now we can split this up into parallel processing on the cloud, and we can take all those pixels of corn or blueberries or anything and compare it to our climatic data that shows our abnormal forecasts, abnormal historical context, to put that in the so what aspect of things. So this is an example of corn in drought areas from the top producing states. Here's percent of population by state experiencing a 2-week heat anomaly. This is just looking at temperature data into different bins of the anomaly compared to the 30 years prior, and all that's done dynamically in real time. I did these figures from a Colab notebook on Google late last night as I was trying to get some examples together for this. So, but that's the idea, right? And that changes. It changes the development workflow for how questions are answered, right? Because now it's not that the comms office says, hey, we now have let's say we have a heat wave forecast coming in 2 weeks. We want to put that into historical context. Now we have tools that let us respond quickly to that and let us do that without developing new code and a new product and a one-off sort of programming effort to do that. We can use tools that are already in place to do that quickly. And the ability for the communications staff, for the climate monitoring staff that works operationally in this realm, to be able to now have new insights at reduced operations and maintenance costs long-term, that's what we're aiming for. So again, IPG is going to use this to drive a lot of our insights and our analysis. A key goal is to be interoperable with platforms like ArcGIS Online. Here's an example. The output that we're going to make can go right into ArcGIS Online maps, dashboards, story maps. So that is key, to utilize the other cloud-based platforms that we have. Here's another example of what we can do in Earth Engine. I just want to talk about just a climatology comparison, to be able to look at what does the climatology look like that's different between NClimateGrid, Prism, other data sets. And the author of the normals at NCI said within 60 seconds of being introduced to the tool, I had created an analysis and done a comparison. It would have taken me over a day to do on my own. And that's what we're trying to do. Orders of magnitude change to how we can respond and do these insights and analysis in what we're working on. So we have a new site-wide NOAA license for Earth Engine. So we have that IPG has been and NITIS. I have to recognize Drought.gov and NITIS. Together, they have funded the operational use of Earth Engine within NOAA so that we can start using that platform anywhere in NOAA. And the other big part of this is that this isn't just like a researchy sort of one-off. This is running in a NOAA FSMA boundary and has gone through and is on the NOAA Google Cloud contract. So it is operationally ready to be used. And that's a big part of this whole plan, right? Is that to be able to expedite our faster research to operations and research to action, to get the data into the hands of our industry partners mere days or weeks after they've recognized a need, not months and years. That's the moral of the story and where we're going with this. So thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists as well. Bear with us while we We have about 20 minutes for Q&A, comments, questions. So we start with the account.
And then ask away.
So please, anybody who has a question, start by introducing yourself.
Hi, Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications. I'm a longtime ESIP-er on the founding board of ESIP, actually, in 1997. Okay, I'm going to stop with the time. I have two really hard questions because we're all big people here, and this is how ESIP works. We just dive right in. The first one is, and I think I heard Steve say this, do you have 2 years to show success in this? Is that correct, or is it 4? 2. Wow. That's a lot. The big question that I have is, how is this different from what the private sector has been doing for a long time? In other words, the Walmart, other organizations have their own weather teams. Have been using weather for a long time to drive movement of products and services and all that sort of stuff. I have my own idea as to how this is different, but I'm just wondering, how do you see this as different? And if you are working with the private sector groups who have provided these kind of services, are they helping you get further along, down the road?
So I'll just start by just acknowledging that the Inflation Reduction Act Industry Proving Ground is a supplemental. And so that's what's driving the 2 years and that time frame. At that point, then that funding is gone. So it's, as was mentioned, kind of a once in a generation kind of opportunity for that. The other part, and I'll allow my colleagues to speak to it as well, but I think the difference would be between authoritative weather information and authoritative climate, a longer term information is the big difference. But it is not lost on us what occurred with the Fair Weather Report and some of those lessons learned as we work. We have not seemingly run into as many issues with that, at least yet. And I think part of that is because with weather information, it's very easy to see if there's a vendor and they provide information, if it's good or not, you're going to know fairly soon. With climate information, that's not necessarily the case. It could be decades before you know whether that was valuable or not, depending on what kind of information you have. So I think that's an area or a space where we're continuing to work. But we do see working with, the private sector, obviously, to do some of that, and we are engaging.
Thank you. That is a complicated question and one that I think we will be talking about probably at every ESIP. But since you mentioned Walmart, I just wanted to give a little bit of the retail context. We ask this question on a regular basis when we do engagements with our retail partners, and we have 13 of the retail members who are part of our inside baseball team, if you will. And the way we've kind of tackled this is from the lens of, let's please bring in the solution providers to the discussion. Let's please integrate the information that we think we need to produce for you that maps what you think you're responding to. And here's sort of like a high level summary of our conversation so far. Okay, that we're still in it. They don't have a team of climatologists and applied climatologists. So issue number one, some of the larger enterprises like Walmart's do have a small team of meteorologists. I thought it was going to be a lot bigger. I was surprised. And the meteorology team is so hyper focused on events coming next week and next month. So the climate discussion is with a different set of expertise and is a different conversation. And I would argue that my synopsis of what we've heard is we don't have a good grasp on how to interpret climate risk information in the context of our business. And the companies are still formulating their own internal responses. So we're early in the discussion. There is a huge opportunity. We, NOAA, don't envision solving the problem. And in fact, hope and think that we were going to be highlighting a whole lot of questions that need to be addressed for the industry. It's early. That's what we think. So, but when it comes to data, I look at IPG effort as an early investment by the industry to secure some of their framing of climate risk and opportunity so that they can write the right set of RFQs and questions that they want the solution provider to go solve. I think we're in the framing section early on. And that to be reconciled with the research that is being produced by the climate research team. So that channel for the retailers is really with and through the NOAA colleagues. But when it comes to like adaptation and resilience engineering solutions, I don't see NOAA in that engineering space, but we will be producing data and information that would help inform the code changes, what we think would be the change in the engineering standard, or the understanding of all that so that our companies could then work appropriately with their private sector. We're in the middle of that triangle. Retail story. I think it's different for architecture, engineering, and insurance reinsurance.
I'll say one thing on it, maybe a different take on it. I think one of the observations I've had from our experience so far with retail, what I'm hearing out of that group, is that even if you have a GIS team, nobody likes downloading thousands of files and untarring them and reformatting them from GRIB to NetCDF or GRIB to GeoTIFF. I mean, sometimes
No, you're at ESIP. I don't know. They might.
we've all done that so much. I'm tired of that. And so it helps everybody be more efficient. And then the byproduct of that is now it lowers the bar of entry to folks that may not have all of that background of our inside baseball data formats and things like that. And so it becomes more equitable and allows a wider range of people to participate in what we're doing, right? I've seen repeatedly. So one of the things I've worked on over the years is this tool called the Weather and Climate Toolkit, which will take, in essence, hard to deal with format and make it into a GIS format. And one of the big takeaways from that is we see over the years, once you made our data just more accessible to people, more people start using it. More people come up with insights from it. I think regardless of big or small companies, it's nothing but opportunity, and it makes jobs easier and more efficient for everyone.
just a quick follow-up. Two things. One, I would offer to any information or to work with NCEI on experience that we've had over the last 9 years, working with the All Hazards Consortium. They have 45,000 members, food, fuel, utilities, sectors, all that stuff. I've been working with them on how to use NOAA data in many different ways. So it could be a great way to help move things forward in certain areas as well. The other question is just when this supplemental comes to an end, by the way, I love the work that's going on. I think it's absolutely needed. Kudos to NCI for taking the reins here and making it happen. What happens after that 2 years? Is your goal to make this such a great service that Congress says, okay, here's a 10-year budget for making this happen and all that sort of stuff? Is that the North Star for this supplemental? Thanks.
Dave, thanks for that question. Obviously, that would be a resounding yes. If they would do that, that would be great. We have to be prepared for the alternate scenario as well. And that was, we spoke to that a little bit as well, where we're trying to basically not create a lot of technical debt, build on existing platforms, leverage what we have. So to actually try to use some of this capability to reduce our O&M tail on some of the things that we can do, so we can do some of those things. But we obviously will try to garner support, put forward, hey, this is really good. This is why it's important. There's an example from the engineering sector where they work with USGS on seismic loading, and they have an authorization and appropriation to every 5 years update that loading to inform the building codes. What if that model could be followed with some of the things that we do where it's very impactful? So there are models out there that we would love to emulate, and some of it is about the enthusiasm that's been shown by my colleagues on getting some of this done and showing the success, showing the impact of that in order to garner some of that support.
It looks like we have a question online. Laura McBride, you have your hand up.
No, I do not have a question.
Okay.
I have a question
uh,
is there another one? Yeah, please check this.
I'm Bob Chen. I'm retired from Columbia University, actually the ESIT member and was the director of the NASA Socioeconomic Data and Application Center. And I've been around ESIT almost as long as Dave. So I guess I have a question. Jenny, I thought it was good that you pointed out the important role of forecast data and models in the decision making. But I still get the sense that people are thinking that, oh, I just need better climate data to improve my climatology. And if the climate were stable, then I could look at a forecast and compare the two and make good decisions. We're obviously in a situation where climate's not stable, and the 1 in 500-year flood is coming every couple of years, and people don't know what to make of that and how to interpret it. Maybe the risk insurance people are smart enough and have models to take into account a changing climate, but I think that's probably what scares them, right? But I don't think the rest of the world kind of understands how to interpret changing, the data coming in for a changed climate, and we don't know how changed it is as we're in the middle of the transient. And so how do you put these things together and thinking about the data integration between climate observations and these kinds of forecasts and future risk decision making?
It's a great question. I think, so I've actually had the opportunity to engage with the architecture and engineering sector while my colleagues have been engaging with the other sectors, and they're not. It's very interesting to work with American Society of Civil Engineers. They're not looking for better climate models. They just want the climate model we have today. They trust us already. They trust our science. They want us to translate it to what they need, and they want us to align it. Today, we do normals on a decadal scale to satisfy World Meteorological Organization timelines, a scientific timeline, not a, hey, in 2025, I need to have the latest past, current, future models so that they would inform. And we're going to work with them to sort out, well, how should we interpret those climate projections to inform what we do? There isn't an answer. It's not the same as the statistics from the last 30 years where you have a mean value and you have a measure of uncertainty that you can translate into a factor of safety. There's an equation to do that for engineers. And so they're looking at our future projections and saying, well, which scenario should we choose? What is the uncertainty? How would I make that a factor of safety? Should I choose to build this for 30, 50, 70 years? So it's a different number depending on which one you target. And so this is a co-production discussion of what makes sense. And we're actually asking them questions for how we do it. And it's very smart communities, climate scientists versus engineers. And I got to applaud them for their ethics. They know it's changing, so they need to design for what is changing. And they're looking to us for some of the best information, but they're willing to help us figure that out. And that's one of our challenges. The insurance industry, they have catastrophe models that are historic, but we're working with NSF and with academia university to say, well, how do we combine it with our climate projections so that we're better informing, where things are moving. Should you be building there? Should you be doing this there? What is your risk going to look like in 5 to 10 years? This is the part why I think it actually answers a little bit of Dave's question too, on what's the difference between the weather and the climate. This is the part we haven't really sorted out of what does it mean? What projection are you going to use? And how do you figure out your uncertainty? Or are you going to do this in a little different way for exceedance probabilities of what makes sense? What's the best practice for that community? So those discussions are ongoing and are going to be repetitive as we go forward. So great question, really big challenge. And I think that the biggest thing I would say is that those sectors, they are trusting us. They trust our science. They just want help translating it. And it's not a straightforward statistical translation anymore. As you go into the future, there's far more degrees of freedom and uncertainty, and trying to quantify that, I think, is going to be one of our challenges over time. And we won't be able to do it with every variable. We'll have to do different things and apply different techniques. And so some of those conversations are ongoing as we speak with these sectors.
Oh, I grabbed the, sorry, I grabbed the mic. This is a question, I think, for Jenny. It seems like the retail is focused on those large retail chains. We're talking about folks that are making decisions about investing in infrastructure to the tune of 30 or 40 or 50 years. And I'm thinking about, when we walk down, downtown Washington or any community, and we see a lot of businesses that have gone out of business. And I'm talking about the small mom and pop shops or the very small retail chains. How is what you're doing informed by and useful to those very small businesses?
That's a great question. I think we have some work to do there. So there's no one easy answer that will get to your multinationals and your small and medium enterprises. And in fact, we make these assumptions that your multinational, large Fortune 20, 200, they have a large team of climatologists and meteorologists. Well, okay, so we're learning that it's all over the place. The small and medium enterprises want tailored information. And in for many ways, I think a lot of what Steve is going to put together will be not only access to the data and the data integration capabilities, but really the map, the value added output. In many ways, we keep that small and medium enterprise individual sort of right in the forefront of the persona. on a pretty regular basis. I think the challenge here is, the knowledge content varies pretty significantly. And then the preparedness, right? For retail, right? So they're asking the climate questions. I want to come back to the data integration and maybe we can talk about it separately. But really, they're worried about the current year extreme event cycle and how they can prepare. And how did this year's event compare to what happened last year? So did I have enough inventory? What were my supply chain misoptimizations? And if this year is similar like last year, I'm going to make my business decisions differently. But this year is going to be worse than last year. Oh, I need to make different analysis on my own business information. Well, that does affect your small and medium enterprises because they're dependent on the delivery of goods and services. I think that there's a level of literacy that we need to invest in for the last mile. There's no level of data and information that we can produce that's going to change the decision context or influence. Like, we don't make that decision for the retailer, right? So I think we recognize or really, really empathetic on those that don't have the in-house capabilities. So what is within NOAA's scope where we can go as far as we can with the services that we can provide, being very mindful that there's a burgeoning private sector that needs to take the ball forward. And I think, this is going to be a journey, and we'll discover this in the retail context. I hope that you will come and ask me that question every 6 months and that we've been able to move the conversation forward. That's what I have today.
Yeah, let me go ahead and chime in briefly. So one of the many projects we're doing from the insurance reinsurance focus is, and a valid criticism we have is, well, the $1 billion disasters don't focus on the small to medium scale events, which happen. It covers a much larger population set. So I think that context and that information, blending that with physical hazard data and socioeconomic data we get from census and CDC and FEMA, that's all part of the more comprehensive integration of information to help people understand their hazard space in the past and then potentially into the future.
Yeah, there's a product called sub-billion-dollar disaster on my list of bullets. So hopefully we can go sub.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you very much to the panelists. George, if you're still here, thank you for your help. So the slides are in the Google Drive folder. So if you're interested in following some of those links, they're all there. And I hope you have a nice break. Is it lunchtime, I think?